So it's been a few days since Steam updated their new policies to go over what users are allowed to purchase, and I figured now that a little bit of the smoke is settled, I wanted to talk about it and give my opinions on how I think it's super bad. So to start out with, my name's Ojiro. I work in games, and I also play a lot of games when I have time. And we've been seeing an issue as time has gone by where more and more companies are getting attacked by payment processors like Visa and MasterCard for selling certain content. It's usually starts out with like, oh, we don't want this certain adult content. Some places there's like no adult content at all. And it is all generally pointed at fictional content. When it comes to actual real adult content, these places largely ignore all of it. And they're just like, we make a lot of money from places like OF or otherwise. So a couple days ago, this group called Collective Shout comes out and starts talking about how, oh, wow, this is so good. We got this huge win. And Collective Shout is this group of crazy feminists out of Australia that have been trying to censor everything under the sun since basically forever. I'm not going to go over them too deeply. I know Savvy, a user on Twitter, has gone over them a bit. I'll link them down below. I don't want to really talk about the like deep dive into the individuals that work there. And at a glance, everyone can look at this that doesn't really know what's going on and say, oh, well, the things that the payment processors are asking to have removed are they shouldn't be on Steam. And part of me agrees. A lot of the games that have been removed are games about like incest, which I'm surprised that Steam didn't have some kind of policy on their platform already where certain, at least words couldn't be used in the title. Because there's a lot of people in government that don't understand games, and when you put something out there that's really offensive, it's easy for there's some people in government that really want to overcorrect and start regulating things, and the people that would end up regulating it are not going to regulate it in any kind of way that is good for creativity, freedom of expression, good for users. It's not something that I want to see happen to the games industry. But even though these games are like really objectively like why would you make this and put this on Steam? It's one thing if Steam decides, hey, don't put this stuff up here because we can complain at Steam. But it's another thing when we have payment processors that are basically used by everyone. We are all required to use in this modern society either Visa or MasterCard if we want to use any kind of debit or credit card, at least in the United States. I'm not terribly familiar with what kind of credit card processors or so forth are in use in Europe or basically outside of the US in general. But we do know that these are very big companies, and they have been moving slowly away from just being a facilitator of payments moving between point A to point B to someone that is starting to say, hey, we want to get in on what is and isn't allowed online. And the easiest way to start doing that is to go after like the low-hanging fruit, to start giving yourself and imbuing yourself with that power. In this case, they've been going after more and more sexual content online. Be like, oh, well, we don't want this, we don't want that. Again, all this content they're going off of online, fictional content. We had a whistleblower come out of where MasterCard and Visa were not stopping payments for things that are CSAM related. And they were like, hey, they got notified that this was all going on, that they should have stopped this. And they didn't care because it made them a lot of money. And at the end of the day, I don't think any of them actually care about things like protecting children. I wouldn't be surprised if a number of those executives are on that elusive Epstein list that is somehow missing. But I digress. We have been seeing, as time has gone by in the West, the thing that really worries me is how in the West we have had more and more extremes for political stuff where people are almost encouraged and like not punished for saying really really wild things online if they are on the far left of the spectrum. Basically, we have been encountering issues where we've got people that will say things like, "Oh, if you disagree with me on this, you're a Nazi. If you don't think, this particular trans thing, if you don't agree with that, you're a transphobe. If you have this certain opinion, you're a bigot." And then in another statement, they'll say, "Hey, I think we should kill all Nazis, transphobes, and bigots." And it's these really casual calls to violence and extreme statements from these individuals that are becoming more and more popular because a lot of companies, they don't punish it. You're not going to see punishment for that on Twitch. You're not going to see punishment for that on Twitter's adopted more of like a free speech model, so I can at least okay that. But with like Reddit, if you have a extreme left-leaning opinion, you are encouraged and you're echo chambered. But if you have anything that is slightly conservative, you run the risk of having your account banned. And now, I wanted to go over some instances in recent history where we have seen people getting debanked from people where basically they have an opinion or they do these things, and individuals that are left-leaning in various countries, whether it's the US, UK, Canada, will come in and say, we need to remove their ability to receive money and basically do business with banks. I just asked Grok to give me some examples and like left or right leaning, depending on like what it was. The list I got talked about like Nigel Farage, where he had his bank accounts closed in the UK. He's, more on the conservative side of things. We had in Canada the Freedom Convoy protest. That's when the truckers were like, protesting things like the vaccine mandates during COVID, where the Prime Minister of Canada, Trudeau, was like, you know what the correct way to resolve this is? To debank these individuals, freeze their bank accounts, and freeze the bank accounts of the people that are donating to them. Basically saying because they had a certain view, like political worldview, and they were protesting, we needed to basically make it so that they couldn't access their money. We have a Dr. Joseph Mercola. This is an individual that was, complaining about anti-vaccine, more on the anti-vaccine side, which has become more and more popular, especially since COVID, because that whole thing was just a wild ride. And he got his business accounts at JP Morgan shut down because it was like, oh, you're criticizing the government's handling of this. Instead of the government coming out and saying, no, we were going to talk about this more, it was easier to just punish this individual, to treat them as an example. The National Committee for Religious Freedom, this nonprofit, had their bank account shut down at JP Morgan Chase because they're a religious organization. They're more on the conservative side. And for the reason they're saying, they're guessing that activists via ESG mandates were targeting these religious and conservative groups that were calling for more conservative values. Crypto stuff. This is, I wouldn't say this is really a ideological thing. I'm not too sure on like the crypto space and why these individuals were getting like debanked by certain people. It says it's because of like high risk, crypto stuff. I'm not super sure. It calls it left leaning from the Biden administration, but I don't know if we can chalk this up to that, and we could chalk this more up to like just concerns for crypto scammy things. I'm totally unfamiliar with this, but I'm not willing to try to chalk this up here. Again, Laura Loomer, a right-wing activist and commentator, had her account shut down. JP Morgan Chase again. She has conservative values. Gun manufacturers and fossil fuel companies were under the Obama administration. You had that administration targeting these individuals to try and make it so that they were not allowed to make money. Because instead of making good arguments for things like gun control, it was easier to just say, hey, why don't we make it so that they can't actually make money, which means they go out of business. And there were a couple organizations that were left leaning that got banned. It talks about some pro Palestine organizations where it's saying it's probably because of anti-terror sanction laws, where banks are trying to comply with that, because at least in the case of Palestine, you've got like Hamas there, and there are people in the United States that are like pro Hamas, like of all things. And it also talks a little bit about Muslim charities back at the breakout of 9/11. So, in more recent history, it is almost universally these individuals that are more left-leaning that are coming in to say, hey, we need to, like, we can't, for a lot of these left-leaning folks, they cannot win their arguments. When they come forward and they say, I believe in X, Y, and Z, and you're like, okay, great. Let's have a conversation on that. Why do you think X, Y, and Z? And they can't win their arguments. So the result is they say something, you say, hey, I disagree, and then suddenly you're a Nazi because you can't see, you do not see the way things, the way that they do. I said that wrong, but you get the idea. People that are like, hey, I think you should, if somebody says something as simple as, hey, I think you should leave kids alone, it's generally considered homophobic or transphobic, and suddenly you're a bigot and a transphobe and you're an evil person. And we have seen, especially out of like the trans movement, where people are like, they hate people that they view as transphobic, which is generally anyone that doesn't 100% agree with that movement. And then in the next breath, they'll say, man, I really wish we could kill all transphobes. And it's like, this is an inappropriate thing to say. It's dumb. And it just shows that these individuals, they can't, instead of just saying like, hey, I'm going to do me and I'm going to leave the world alone, you've got individuals that will go out there and will say really weird or vile things. And then when they're called out on it, instead of saying, oh, I'm getting criticism or we have a disagreement, it is they do the worst thing that could happen in their eyes to them, which is be called a name. So they call other people names, and then they're like, oh, it's okay to basically cause harm on people that have disagreements with me. In this case with Steam, we have them targeting the low-hanging fruit, where they're saying, hey, we don't want this special adult content. We saw this in Japan, where more and more websites were being told, hey, you can't sell these things. Now you can't sell these things. Now you can't sell these things. And it just grew to the point where certain companies were just like, look, we can't sell, like, we can't use payment processors to like actually stay in business. And it would be one thing if they were going at this from the perspective of they wanted to get out of funding adult content in general. There's a number of issues that we have as society in the West right now, and that is generally, like, we've always had issues with like alcohol, gambling. More recently, porn has become a huge issue, where we have a lot of people, particularly on the left, that will encourage young girls and women to go into the business of selling their bodies online. And that is supposed to be this great thing, and it's liberating, and it's terrible. And if these credit card companies were to all say, hey, we're going to get out of the business of funding anything related to this, at least we could say, okay, this is a principled stance, even if people disagree with it, because they're not saying things like, we're not going to let people buy alcohol, or I guess gambling, you have to come in with like a debit card. But like, they could say, hey, you can't use an ATM at a casino. I think people would revolt, but I digress. They could also do things like, hey, we're not going to use card processors for anything that is related to like marijuana. But they're not doing any of those things. They generally have left real life alone and are only targeting fictional content, and they slowly increase the pressure over time. We have a user over on Reddit made an interesting post on when Civet AI went in and they added certain restrictions. And for this, we're not sure that this is a Visa or MasterCard problem, or if this is something that they're trying to get ahead of to try and keep regulators' eyes away from them. But one thing that they have banned, and there's a lot of like adult content in here. One of them starting out with incest, which is what, Steam is put up there. But one of the points that they go through is content that promotes hate, harm, or extremist ideologies. Now, it's got the post here. So let's talk a little bit about that, because that's the thing that we have been hearing more and more over time from individuals, where if there's a disagreement, they're like, oh, I disagree with you on this. And then suddenly it's like, well, you're a hateful person. And that is the thing that I think, most concerned of from not just a game industry perspective, but for a society perspective, where we currently live in a society where we have a individual that was arrested who was hanging out with a lot of extremely rich people that he brought to his personal island to commit terrible acts against children systemically, where they think that there are up to 1,000 victims on this island. And everyone is just like, well, we have no idea who was there. Who knows? And we know that we have had, like, not only a lot of rich people, but we've had, at this point, 2 presidents between Clinton and Trump that interacted with this person. So we've got, like, this systemic abuse that has happened of real life people, and like basically all across the board, everyone's like, yeah, we're just going to ignore that. So we live in this kind of world where it's so difficult just to say, hey, we have a list of people that, visited this place and potentially did these heinous acts. We want to know, and we've been told we're not allowed to know. We also live in a society where more and more people on one part of society on the left, they're getting increasingly deranged with a lot of their worldviews. We've got people that will go out and insist that like terrorist organizations are better than the United States of America and Western civilization. And they'll go out there and they'll protest and they'll set things on fire. And then when you say, hey, let me engage with you on this, it's like, no, you're a hateful person and you're a bigot and you're actually like all this name calling. Because again, to those individuals that are calling them names, the worst thing that could happen to them is they get called a name. They don't want to be hit with a label, because to them, being hit with a label is the end of the world. So these individuals, like we're in this place where there's this huge disconnect. And we have all these extremely rich people that either ignored or, facilitated, these terrible acts, at least in this one case that we know of, potentially more that we do not know of. And if we start giving this permission to these companies with these extremely wealthy individuals to just slowly start deciding who can and cannot receive banking services, it's going to be a huge issue for basically anyone. Can you imagine if you were to go online and say something and say, hey, I don't like this thing, I disagree with this thing, and suddenly the next day you were told, hey, you know what, that's a hateful comment for saying this. Like, for, let's say someone says, hey, I'm religious, I don't believe in gay marriage, or I don't believe in trans ideology, and they were like, oof, that's hateful. And because it's hateful, we can't do business with you because we don't want to be seen as a brand that associates with hate. And that is the thing that I'm most concerned about, because the games industry, there's a lot of wrong in the game industry. But if you're not allowed to buy games, it's not the end of the world. If you're not allowed to buy anime, it's not the end of the world. But if someone is like, hey, we're going to punish you and your entire family for a worldview, which is what I believe that this could easily escalate into over time. It's like boiling a frog. That's the thing where I'm like, this has the potential for extreme abuse. And I don't think any of us should look at this and say, oh, this is a win. Because if we sit there and let them ignore real world issues where they are willing to turn a blind eye to really terrible things, but if they're willing to just focus on make-believe, because that's the thing that they're like, oh, that's our brand. What about our brand? Which, again, or not again, I don't think I've talked about this yet, but like when I think of credit card processors, I think of them in the same vein as a utility company. You don't want to hear from your utility company. If you hear about your utility company, it's probably something bad, where it's like, oh, I suddenly don't have power. You're going to be really upset at your utility company. Otherwise, you just want to pay your monthly bill and you want to go about your way. Same for credit card payment processors. If you're like, hey, I just want to swipe my card and go about my day. I want to buy my groceries. I want to buy stuff online. You don't care if it's Visa or MasterCard on the card. You just care that you're able to buy stuff. And now we've got Visa and MasterCard saying, actually, like, we need to worry about our public image. And it's like, dude, no one cares about you. But now that you're doing this, I care about you, and in a very, very bad way. So that's my views on this. I am deeply worried that if this continues going on, we're going to be coming into an issue where when certain governments come into power, they're like, oh, well, let's just exert a little bit of political pressure on this company and let's just eliminate an individual's ability to live in modern society. And that's something I don't want to see for anyone. I think that's terrible. But we could get there. This is so bad. I'm really, really disappointed to see this. And I imagine some, especially for Canada, will be like, oh, well, the bank was only doing this because of the government put forth an order. At least with governments, you can vote them out. But if we're just going to instill all this power in a private company, I don't get to vote on who becomes the CEO of MasterCard or PayPal or Visa or any of these places. I get no say. It just happens. And if we run into a case where a bunch of really crazy, douchebags are like, oh, well, we have all this power now, it's just going to attract bad actors to get into this space and start pushing forth their, toxic worldview. Because, again, I hate being a left versus right thing, but on the left right now, it really feels like they want two things of you. They either want you to be destitute or dead. And I don't want any kind of mechanism that assists in people being destitute, and I don't think violence should be done on anyone because, if you have some kind of disagreement of opinion. But that's all I got to say about this for right now. Thank you for your time, and I hope to see you all again in a future video. Farewell.